Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We're really honored to welcome these extraordinary designers and architects who've been deeply engaged in the ongoing effort to build after the wildfires. Heidi Bonesteel, Michele Trout, May Sung, and Andrew Scott are all members of the Design Leadership Network's Rebuilding Committee for California, where they've contributed their expertise, perspective, and leadership to help shape thoughtful approaches to recovery and reconstruction. Some of their work being realized in the New California Classics digital book, referred to in the visuals you see in the showroom and on screen. We are also grateful to have this conversation guided by Lindsey Shook, Editor-in-Chief of California Home and Design, whose work consistently highlights the ideas and voices shaping the future of design in California. On behalf of Waterworks, thank you all for sharing your time, insight, and commitment to this important work. We're very grateful to have you here and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you guys for coming. This is amazing turnout. I'm Lindsey of California Home and Design and had the pleasure of being a part of this discussion because in our 2 issues ago, or last issue, sorry, I can't remember much these days, I swear, we had the opportunity to feature a little summation of this amazing book. And I don't, we've, as a brand, felt very passionate about this rebuild and contributed in giving back on the furniture and accessories level, so we were really engaged and want to see this effort grow. So let's get into it. So if my panelists could please just say your name and how you contributed to the making of this, not just because it's more than a book, right? It's an effort that's going to really change the landscape of Southern California. So, go ahead.
I'm Heidi from Bonesteel Trout Hall, and I was directly affected, along with my business partner Michele, by the fires. And so, Michele and I were just talking, and we're like, we need to do something collaboratively to help. And that's how we kind of got started on this whole journey and adventure, which has been really interesting and fun.
I'm Michele Trout with Bonesteel Trout Hall. And when I lost my home and we lost our studio, and when it first happened, I realized we had an opportunity. There were a group of 350 people that we could get together to determine how we could rebuild the Palisades in Altadena. And collectively, we started this rebuilding group, and we did a charrette for a few days. I'll let May explain that. But it was a really amazing community effort.
Hi, my name is May Sung. I'm Super Design Architecture. I'm also a fellow Palisadian. I also lost my home and my business on January 7th.
And she's still smiling, okay, guys?
And then thanks to DLN, also Waterworks too, and Lindsey, there were a lot of support behind this. We all came together. There were 20 some of us? 35 of us that came together over the weekend. And then we all rolled up our sleeves, worked together, and it came up with different ideas and then also styles to serve as a reference book in the process of rebuild.
Hi, I'm Andrew Scott with Appleton Partners. I fortunately did not lose my house on that terrible day, but my family and I are from the Palisades, and so when the dust settled, there was this enormous guilt that as a design professional, I should and could do more. And so thankfully with the DLN and Save Iconic Architecture, there was a structure for me to contribute. And I have to say, for those of you that weren't fortunate enough to be at the charrette, it was a pretty powerful day. I haven't seen that much energy since school, and to be under those circumstances so positively outlooking, well, you see some of it on the screen today. It was very moving and something we are looking forward to continuing to contribute to.
So I want to start by just talking in general about rebuild efforts, and then we'll get a bit more into the digital guidebook. So if you could kind of each quickly, which is a hard thing to do, describe the current status of rebuild efforts in either Altadena or Palisades where you're focused.
I can only speak to the Palisades, and Michele and I have projects there that mostly were already started prior to the fire, and so for a long time those got put on hold, but now they're back up and running. And we're starting to get energy from people that are reaching out to start their projects, but it's really slow, and there's a lot of complications that we're trying to figure out along the way. So,
Michele, what are those, since you're working together, what are those complications?
I would say the complications are trying to come up with a plan that is not horribly expensive. You know, there are a lot of limitations as far as price and square foot price for rebuilding. So I think coming up with plans that aren't super duper expensive, that's why this effort could be great, because the plans exist. You would just need to have somebody help you get working drawings done and implement the plan. So that's one option. I think that's the biggest obstacle right now, is rebuilding in a thoughtful way and also in a way that is more economical than traditional building.
And Man, you're leading the efforts in the Palisades, so if you could just give us a quick snapshot.
Okay, so during the last year, I was also part of Team Palisades, one of the volunteer group in the Palisades. We've done a lot in terms of pushing the government on multiple levels, state, city, county, and then also now federal, in terms of to get funding and also to move the needle, changing sort of the parameter around plan check, essentially. And then we were just talking about just before the panel, that now the plan check, the first plan check goes by so fast, we're not used to it, because usually it's so slow. So trying to push through those barriers, and then yes, one of the big issues is going to be budgets. And then, you know, and then also it's also a town that's lack of infrastructure. So we're trying to put back the infrastructure. It's going to be a great town when it's done. I promise you that. It's going to be the best town in the city. But the thing is, like, there's still
You're completely rebuilding it, basically. Yeah. Andrew?
I mean, I think what you'll kind of hear here consistently is the progress is slow. It is evolving as we go. Budget is also kind of the common theme here. And I think, as any of you would know in the design industry, if you don't know what your budget is, it's really kind of hard to commit something. And so for most of, personally, the time that we've invested, both through the firm and outside of that, is just talking to people and what this process is about. Most people in the Palisades and Altadena have never built a custom house, and so this is a very scary and foreign process. And first, for them to understand what that means, and then ultimately what that might deliver for them, is just really where that time has been focused on.
And Heidi, what's surprised you the most about the rebuild so far? Or a rebuild you're working on?
well, one of the things I thought was a bit unfortunate, and like we've all talked about, a big part of what we could offer to the community is actually a lot of support just with our expertise, because there's just so many unknowns. But we've watched people go down a rabbit hole of one idea of what they're going to do. For example, like modular building was one idea that our friends went through for like 6 months. They spent a lot of money doing that, and then that just blew up in their faces, and now they're using a custom builder because there's just a lot of unknowns. So I think the best thing that we can do now, we all decided, was really just be almost there as support systems.
A therapist and
a little
builder,
bit.
designer. And Michele, how has your firm, or have you shifted your process at all as a result of this?
Well, we've shifted it a lot because we're offering lower fees, first of all, for people that were affected by the fires. And we also are trying to streamline it because everyone's exhausted. Yeah. So we're trying to make it as simple for them as we can.
Got it. So less decision,
right?
More picking things out and just, yeah,
right.
Makes sense. For you, Andrew, you know, I heard that a lot of homeowners wanted to rebuild exactly what they had before. And, you know, I'm curious from the architecture standpoint, what are your clients most concerned about right now with their redesign?
So right now we have two projects. One is, thankfully, they have insurance. But what kind of came to light during that process was, I don't want to say this insensitively, but we joke in the design industry that when you're working with a client, a lot of times they tell you they understand what you're designing. Many times they don't necessarily, but usually the stars align, and by the end of it, you have a project that everyone's happy about. What's clear right now is people, some of these clients, they want what they had, but they want it slightly different. But this is also something that they didn't want. They don't want this process. And so being able to connect with them is really probably the biggest challenge we've had in terms of fun is not the right word, but this is a process that they have to be engaged in. This is their house. And so personally, I don't have a problem with helping someone redesign what they lost, but I think there also has to be a healthy dialogue. And for many of these people, these are different life circumstances. Maybe their children have gone off to college now. They don't need necessarily the same house. So it's being receptive to that dialogue and trying to tease out of them really what they hope to get out of this. Again, something they don't want. And so that requires a little bit of patience and balance. Because frankly, they are hard pressed to get this process going. But if we are too aggressive, we can get ahead of them, and that leads to other challenges. So really, it's about listening to your clients and making sure you're not out ahead of them.
May, I know you're working a lot with the city and with the government. So I'm curious, what are the biggest regulatory or permitting hurdles you faced so far?
The biggest is still the hillside stabilization because it's a state law, whereas CEQA and coastal were waived. I know I'm getting too technical here, but the thing is that hillside is still the biggest hurdle regarding plan check because the city cannot waive those codes.
And has anything changed as a result of your work or, what's happened in the Palisades? In terms of regulations and codes, yeah.
Well, the regulations and codes are still pretty much the same. It's just the speed of processing them and then also being able to have dialogues with the city and the state, and they're a lot more accessible now. Right. Before, when you call OADWP, if you're lucky, you get a call back in 3 months.
Wow. Heidi and Michele, I'd love to know, have you discovered any new materials that you're leaning on to prevent resilience in the future? Especially on the interior side, because that was a big problem as well for people who didn't lose their homes, right?
Not on the interiors, in my opinion. Maybe Michele has another idea. But what we really do think a lot more about is the landscaping, which we also touched upon. That's something that could have a real impact on the safety and fire resistance of the new builds. But on the interiors, no, we haven't.
What about you, May? And Andrew, I'd love to hear, any new materials you're working with?
Actually, there's been interesting new fire sprinkler system that's come up. So you have the Ultimus, I don't know if you guys seen that. It's actually a steam. It's more like a mist system rather than a sprinkler system. And then there's been a lot of interest. There's even sound, like sonic. There's even sound protection for fire. So this is encouraging a lot of people being more inventive in terms of, products.
It was a sound?
Yeah,
How does that work?
Sound wave. I don't know the technical part, but the thing is I could send you a video if you want to see it. But the thing is essentially if there's a flame, somehow sound could suppress the flame.
Huh.
Wow. And then also there's another system called the fire dome that protects your entire neighborhood. They're like rocket launchers, they're water balloons. It's crazy what I've seen.
You never knew you were going to learn all this, huh?
Oh, there's so many things. I'm like an insurance expert now too. So.
We're not going to talk about insurance today, I promise. Andrew, have you changed any building elements or architectural elements to prevent, because that's the big question is we can't rebuild exactly how things were. So what are we changing to prevent in the future?
So material-wise, actually, with the technology that we're seeing today, we do have a lot of tools at our disposal that can recreate many of the styles that you see in the new California classics. They may not have the same touch, or if you're looking really closely at it, but it's enough to really convince people what was lost. I think where designers need to be in step with the client is, obviously these are incremental costs that you can add. How much level of protection does your house justify relative to an insurance cost. So, I mean, these are things that we need to be mindful of. I can speak specifically for the Spanish Revival for our contribution in the book, and that is, there's definitely details that we will pursue, others maybe shy away from. For example, most of your eave details on houses, really you want to avoid rafter tails in the current fire mitigation measures. So plaster cove detail, which would be very typical for Spanish Revival architecture, is something you might see more of, and still vary in character for the architecture. There's additional layers behind plaster, which is inherently non-combustible. The roofing systems themselves with the clay tile roofs. So some of these architectures are a little easier than others. And then there's also site planning opportunities. Again, on the Spanish colonial side, you have courtyards, or you have open decks or patios, you have covered loggias. That all kind of consist of non-combustible materials. So, between materials and kind of sensitive site design, in areas that actually had, fire issues, whether you're in the south of Spain or in northern Mexico. And so there are tools we can draw from that will be fairly authentic.
So I want to switch to the book, and just so you guys know, there's not a physical book printed yet. We will have a digital book soon to share with everyone, but we did, again, like a smaller article in our last issue talking about each style. So there's 7 styles that this group identified that are heritage to Southern California. And the goal, of course, is that we avoid this modular construction and just spec development all over this region, and that we really maintain the architectural integrity of Los Angeles, right? So could you guys just each talk about which style you worked on? Because I can't remember exactly which style everyone worked on, and just give us a quick, bird's eye view of what that is.
I started on California Ranch, and the plans were actually based on my mother-in-law's lot. And then I switched to best practices, which went debunked. So I'll let Michele speak about that.
So I worked on Storybook, and we were all assigned. We didn't get to choose what style we wanted. And at first, when I thought about Storybook, I didn't think it was very interesting or very important. But then I realized that the house that my husband and I were renting was a 1927 Storybook house. So then that kind of brought it all back to life for me. And then as I drove around my new neighborhood in Santa Monica, I realized how many beautiful Storybook houses there are. And then in looking through our work, there's something that is revolving on the screen. We did a really beautiful George Washington Smith house in Montecito that was a Storybook house. So that style became very important to me and very interesting to me. And I worked with Geddes Ulenskis, who's a great architect from Northern California. And it was we had such a good time. And every time I see a Storybook house, I take a picture of it, I send it to Geddes. And it's a style that I didn't know very well that I've fallen in love with. And I hope to see it repeated a lot.
May?
I was given California Modern, and which is a great thing for Palisades, since we have such a rich history of California Modern home. Everyone knows the Eames house, and that there's tons of Lautner and Neutra in there that were unfortunately destroyed. And and then also I'm part of the emergency response committee that deals with a lot of codes and all the fun stuff you guys love to hear about.
And Andrew, what did you work on?
I was Spanish Revival, and for me, I guess I got lucky and kind of directed that way. I grew up, my parents still have it, a 1930s Spanish, I'll call it ranch house in the Palisades. And for me, it started an appreciation at a young age, and then being fortunate to work at Appleton, it just kind of fueled that passion. And for me, it was just in the neighborhood in the Palisades, which I grew up, and there were some notable Spanish Revival homes by master architects, Gable and White being one of them. But for the most part, they were just master builders. And seeing that around my neighborhood was something that was constantly a reminder of home and a sense of place. And for me, that's kind of what I wanted to contribute to.
And Michele, can you just speak a little bit more about what the real hope of this entire guidebook is? Like, what's the intention from the Charette's perspective?
So Heidi and I were talking about this weekend. We're both native Angelenos, and Heidi grew up in Orange County, and we were talking about all the beautiful neighborhoods from San Clemente to Corona del Mar, Laguna Beach, Long Beach, Santa Monica. And all of that was done with so much heart and thought and purpose. And we hope that people can take that, think about that when they start to rebuild. Rebuild in a very, very thoughtful way that pays tribute to the past. Because I think that's what's going to make these neighborhoods special again. And that's what we need.
And has any, I'll put this to May, I don't think it has been used yet, but has this content been, proposed to the city or any, government officials to really make this something that, is leaned on for code or zoning, or, is that the hope as well?
I think so. I mean, I think we had some talks about, I'm not quite sure what.
But the goal is to do it, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I mean, the city does definitely have a standardized plan right now. And I think also the reason for this whole thing is like, do you want to make a home or do you want to make a house? So the thing is, I think all of us lost our home. We really want the characters back. It's not just the people, it's also, the style of the house.
And so could you tell us what's going to be inside each style? So you'll have... You have a little bit of an exception,
right.
an explanation of the style, and then
right.
what else?
Right, and also details that are associated with the style, and then also a sample plan, and then also I think there's references on materials too.
Yeah, there's references for materials for each style, lighting references, architectural details, fireplaces.
So really making it turnkey for people, right? And we spoke a little bit about one of the goals was to avoid this prefab neighborhood pop up everywhere, right? So as an architect, Andrew, what does that mean to you, and how did you lean into that?
I mean, we said it in the beginning of the talk. I mean, we can't understate it or overstate it enough. Budget is going to drive everything, and so everyone's going to have their own path for what works for them. Again, fiscally driven. And so whether that's a production builder or whether that's, a custom architect or somewhere in between, ideally this book will give people resources from which they can reference. For many, again, who've never been through this process, maybe don't know how to collect their thoughts, being able to reference sample plans in the book will help them envision maybe how they want their house to flow, how that may fit on a site. And then furthermore, with the examples of different elevations, what a street may look like, and hopefully something familiar to what they had, because it would represent, in theory, the variety that they were blessed with. These are 100-plus-year-old communities. That's kind of hard to recreate unless you have a very diverse base. And then finally, the detail elements that May was referencing in the book are equally important, because ideally people are going to want to personalize their house to some degree. So with the tools in something like this guidebook, again, if you're maybe working with a production builder, you're now somewhat educated, and then maybe you can collaborate with this builder to refine their standardized plans just enough so that the street has ideally that variety. I mean, we're talking about a lot of homes here.
Well, and I want to talk really about what role community plays in all this, because we tend to build individually for ourselves and build what we want and design for our own families, but I think maybe you could speak to this a bit more, like the community of, specifically in the Palisades, people are going to have landscapes that protect their neighbors' landscapes, right? Or roofs that might protect their neighbors' roofs. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what's happening with the kind of community scale planning per se.
Right. I mean, if I have to say one thing that came out about the fire that was good, was on the positive side, is how we are much more together as a community. And that we're much more educated, and then we're much more proactive as a community. And there are people who have been advocating every single day for us, and that we are stronger as a whole. And what I think, sorry, what was the second part?
Like because we're going to have to start building cohesively as a community, not just for ourselves. So how are you navigating that with your efforts?
Neighbors are actually talking to each other about window placements. And
we need that now more than ever, right?
Exactly. And then also wall placements. We went for decades without really knowing our neighbors. Now we all know each other intimately well. And then, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a great thing, because when we do move back, you are relating to each other on a different level. So
Yeah, everyone will be so grateful when they move back.
Yeah.
And it was such a hard effort on everybody's part
Right.
that I think everyone will be grateful to be back and to be together.
And have homes together.
One thing to add to that too, Lindsay, because May and I were talking about this, and really this is something she had discussed. Again, back to the notion of community. As design professionals, I think one of the things we are going to have to spend a lot of time doing is educating the residents on the landscape changes that are coming. It's going to definitely change the community that you're used to in terms of how much lushness you may or may not see. These are evolving things, and landscape designers and architects are certainly working hard to that end. But nonetheless, to kind of put to a point what May's talking about, if we're building lot lines, you're not going to have landscape separating your house. And so it will be critical where that wall is placed and where those windows are placed. Otherwise, privacy is going to be at a premium.
or you're going to love your neighbor.
Well, and I just want to point out that Patricia Benner, some of you have worked with her, she really played a large role in the landscape part of this guidebook. So once it's out, I urge you to read it. So I have one more question for everyone, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I'll start with you, Heidi. In 10 years, what do you think we will have learned from this process or failed to learn?
My hope is that we will have learned that there is something really special about being able to live along the coast. Again, only referring to the Palisades, which is really my area that I have any comment on because I don't know the Altadena area as well. But if people could understand how special and how grateful that they could live that close to such a beautiful coastline, and to really be thoughtful and consider that when they're building a home. What was the second part?
Oh, that's just a good learning that you hope for. How about you, Michele?
So in retrospect, actually after my house burned down, the architect that was helping me said, okay, you can have no more wood on your house. So in retrospect, we were all living in this la-la land of living in a high fire zone, and everybody's house was covered in wood. We had these 15-foot hedges between all the houses, landscaping everywhere. And I think hopefully we need to learn that we live in a high fire zone and we need to build in a fire resilient manner. And I mean, that's what we're going to have to do.
May?
In 10 years, I'm hoping that the state and the city and the federal government knows how to deal with wildfire and then how to prevent it and how do we recover from it. And so hopefully in 10 years, that's not even an issue. Climate will change, and then, wildfire will still happen. But the thing is how do we deal with it? Not only building resiliently, but how to deal with it as a community. And then the logic is don't put anything that will burn next to your house. That's simple logic.
Andrew?
I guess the idealist in me would be that people recognize the value of place. As designers, we talk about that. We try very hard to create it, or in many cases, to strengthen it. And I think through this terrible tragedy, provided it goes well in the rebuild, that people will understand tangibly what that translates to, and how much that if we do invest in architecture and in design and in landscape in terms of how we treat our homes, that we'll invest for future opportunities in other communities.
Wonderful. I want to open it up for questions. We have a microphone somewhere, but I think just say it loudly, or if you don't get the microphone, and I'll repeat it. So yes, right here.
When will the book come out for all the people in Palisades to see?
When will the book come out?
Yeah, meaning I think he said, I didn't hear the word digitally, but how will you get this word out, sort of the marketing?
Michele or May, do you want to speak to that?
So the book is available now online under the new California Classics, and then we're working on having it printed, and I don't have a date for that yet. But you can go online now and look at it, and for each style, there's 4 elevations and 4 floor plans.
And how does that word get out to all those people in the Palisades now that they're not in this group here?
Well, we had a big event at the Bel Air Bay Club that several hundred people came to. May's been promoting it. We've just been it's kind of a grassroots promotion.
Got it. Thank you.
And just so you know, we are videotaping this conversation, and we're going to make it available to anyone to distribute, any of the panelists, the Design Leadership Network, and anyone who wants to see the video.
Yes, right here.
I'm curious about the surrounding canyon. Like, I know everyone had their own landscape. Everyone had, you couldn't see through some bougainvillea and gorgeous trees, and it was just lush beauties in the hillside and everywhere. But what about, like, you know, people were talking about releasing goats. Like, what is the city going to do on the perimeter so that when we get to, is anything ever going to be able to happen to keep clear? I'm not even talking about the community. I'm talking about the hillside where nobody lives.
So how is the county clearing and taking care of the canyons and the...
I'll take this one. Okay, so first of all, most of the canyons are state parks, and then part of the reason why we burn is because the fire started there and wasn't managed. Right. So one of the federal asks we have right now is management of the state parks and then having them actively engage with us, because that's also going to tie into our insurance. I know we don't want to go there, because if that's managed, this is going to happen again. Right. Yeah.
So how do we enforce the federal government to do that, maybe?
Well, you need federal and state, and also you need funding. We're not going to get into the federal government right now because they're very busy outside the country. Right, so the thing is that, but the thing is that the state, I mean, all of us could be advocate here, every single one of you, because you know what? We're all next to a state park. So Hollywood Hills, right here. So yeah, I mean, all of us could be an advocate. Yeah.
More questions? Yes, here.
I'm curious if you guys know, first of all, thank you for all your pepper through all of this, and I know I live in the Palisades, and the Crusoe Village did not burn, but a lot of buildings around there, some of the historical buildings are still around. Is there also an effort on the commercial side of things to keep things looking historical or not at its
So the question is this same thought or approach applying to commercial development?
Okay, I'll take this one too, sorry. So there's been a lot of different charrettes about the re-envisioning the commercial corridor along Sunset. And one of the bigger issue is that a lot of proposals are proposing additional density, which affects our evacuation. Because if you're from the Palisades, you knew how it was on that day, how long it took us, all of us, to get out of the Palisades. You know what? The streets are not going to widen. And then they talk about changing signals, but that's not going to do much when you imagine if we increase that density along the corridor, having all those additional people trying to escape at the same time. I mean, our buses doesn't come. Like, you can't evacuate on the buses. You can't evacuate on the bikes. So that's a whole other conversation we're having right now. So, you know, you're more than happy to join the conversation.
I'll go here, yes.
Are there any lingering health or safety issues that you're aware of with the soil or just overall remediation? I live very close to the Palisades, and soon had to hear some conversations that you don't know if it's rumor or paranoia.
So
it has been heaped up.
The question is, are there any health issues with soil or any of the remediation that's happened with the environment?
So from what I understand, the air is all clean now. There's no more toxins that are floating around, and it's safe. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure, but that's what we've been told. And a lot of people are moving back. So people are moving back into homes that have been completely cleaned, and everyone feels comfortable with that. They've been triple checked, and that's what we've been told.
Well, actually, there's 10 air monitoring systems on Pali High campus, because Pali High went back a couple months ago. So the thing is that, as far as we know, the air is clean in the Palisades. Soil, on the other hand, is on individual basis. There's a lot of historical toxins, and then there's been, USC, Loyola have all done free soils testing. Mine came back totally clean. I know that there are some people who haven't been, some people who has had issues. And then I know Standing Homes had a lot of concern around that, but the thing is that's, it's really what was there before. That's the issue that's affecting the toxicity.
Sarah, right here.
Hi, I live in LA. I live near the Palisades, and it's not going to go away. This weekend, the Santa Anas are coming again. So it's everyone that needs to follow these rules of building and the future. And how do you feel about that? and spreading the news for the future.
So, and every community of LA should be thinking this way is your question. And how do you?
I'll need more water and more fire awareness, and all.
So can you all speak to, is there any community effort happening across the city?
I'll take that one too.
We'll let the Palisades mayor here speak.
So I think the first thing, there's this organization called Firewise and FireSafe. I would definitely try to start your own Firewise community, because part of the issue is actually education. Knowing, like, you know, putting wire mesh on your vents and on your gutters, right? And then also make sure that your crawl spaces have this, has the vent covers that's fire code rated, right? So there's a lot of things that you can learn and educate your neighbors in order to make yourself fire safe.
I'll just add to one thing on that, so the code actually in the state's been pretty good in terms of fire mitigation measures. Obviously, what happened in the Palisades and Altadena was kind of supercharged, but the new code just came out again January 1st with even further refinements to that. What we tell any client today, if you're building a new house, what zone are you in, for one, because that has an impact on the construction detailing you'll need to do. But two, you got to talk to your insurer. There are still examples where insurers will have conditions, building requirements that are in excess of the building code. Doesn't mean you can't get insurance, but it will impact what it will cost.
And May, I just wanted you to quickly talk about your work with Team Palisades and the seniors you're working with, because I think that's a really important note about informing all communities, because a lot of seniors don't have access to this information. So how can we help our seniors?
So there's a lot of seniors who are not technologically savvy, and which was the issue at the beginning, because a lot of information was being passed around, digitally, because all of us were dispersed everywhere, right? And then so part of the effort of the community is to track down these seniors, and then also having printed materials, having a physical space. For a long time, we didn't have a physical space in the Palisades because all of our commercial corridors were destroyed. So having a space now, being able to have seniors come. There's been events like we have hosted senior luncheons, senior dance for Valentine's. There's so the things that is having them still have a community to come back to and being able to explain to this. And then there's also been different effort by Habitat LA. And of course, Lindsey did this great thing about the Christmas ornaments, because all of those lost our Christmas ornaments. So that was great. Thank you.
Okay, yes, here.
This question is had to both aesthetic and economic. I'm wondering, how do you balance the necessity to get your return back with kind of preserving the aesthetic integrity of the community?
That's a hard, yeah. So you're basically saying, how are you helping clients maximize their lot space and their real estate investment while keeping the architectural and design integrity?
I did worry about that at the beginning. You are going to have some of that, right? The developers have come in, they've bought up lots, you're going to have some of that. But I was actually pleasantly surprised. Most of the clients, at least I've been dealing with, just want what they had. Mm-hmm. Really, they just want what they had. They might want to add a room here, change the style a little bit, make sure more. But the thing is that there's the sentimental part, because, I started this volunteering because I just want to go home, and I didn't want to go home by myself. And so this is part of this. I think this is a common sentiment amongst the entire community. Those who could afford to stay. Of course, there are those that can't afford to stay and they have to sell.
Well, the other thing is most people were underinsured. So if you're underinsured and you had a 2,000 square foot house, you're probably not going to build a 5,000 square foot house. And also, as far as quick permitting, you could only build 10% more than what you had. Is that correct? So
10% more of footprint. But
right.
Yeah.
So if you wanted an expedited permit, then you just had to build what you had plus 10%.
And a free permit.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we got that waived.
Okay, we have time
after 6 months dealing with city council.
Two more questions here.
Do you guys know if there's a similar effort going on for Altadena?
Is there a similar effort in Altadena?
Yeah, there's been multiple efforts in Altadena. we don't like to compare, but sometimes we think they get more help than we do. But, but the things that, yeah, there is.
There's an effort called the Foothill Catalog, and Alex from the Foothill Catalog is doing amazing work, and he got a huge grant, and his plans are approved by the city, so you can so you can fast track those plans, and they're plans that are designed for these small lots. And the Foothill Catalog is a great effort.
James?
So you were talking about 10 years from now, looking back, what you feel like we'll have learned. What do you feel the timeline is for there to be a critical mass of homes that are built and people that home that it feels like
A community. Like, again.
What do you think that?
How long will it take to feel like the communities are back?
We're saying 3 to 5 years. The reason we say that is because 2028 is coming up, and the city doesn't want to look bad. And also, so infrastructure supposedly, most of it would be done by 2028. And then also the thing is like the mayor's EO only applies until 2027. So, after that, you're not going to get exempt for your permit fees. After that, you're not going to be expedited. So there is a wave right now that are beginning to take advantage of that.
Anyone else? I just wanted to add before we go, because we did work on an effort when the fire started where many brands here actually donated items they had sitting around that we gave to people in need. And one thing that shocked me the most from that is that so many brands and manufacturers have things just sitting around. And it actually was great for us, but these situations aren't going away. So just keep that in mind when you do have excess inventory, that if you have a special place you can hold them, because there are people who probably still need it. And there's organizations that are still, who are still donating that. So just keep that in mind. So thank you guys so much for sharing your insights. And thank you, Waterworks, for hosting us. And please stay for some wine and snacks. Thank you.